This is our last sermon in this series called Gospel Change. And if you've been with us for a little while, I'll just kind of explain where we've been if you haven't been to Treeline for a little bit. And we've been in this series called Gospel Change, and we're basically talking about how does the Christian transform? How does the gospel uniquely offer us transformation in a way the world can't offer us? And we talked about how the gospel begins by giving us a new identity to live from. Like, we're not trying to perform for an identity. We actually have an identity given to us by Jesus that we're now living from. But then it gives us a new heart, right? Like, the problem with us ultimately is our hearts are broken. They're enslaved to sin. In the gospel, Jesus Christ actually says, no, I've taken the old heart, I've put it to death, and now there's a new heart in you that actually belongs to Christ and God. And so you've given a new heart that you can actually begin to love God from. And we've given a new power to depend on. This was last week, right? We're not just given a path to transformation, but God actually puts his spirit in us. So we now have a new power to depend on where we can actually transform, actually change in ways that were not previously available to us on our own. And the last thing we're going to talk about today is that we have a new vision to live towards. The gospel begins by giving you an identity to live from, but then it kind of bookends that by looking far ahead into the future and giving you a new future, a new destiny that we're supposed to live towards. So let me read this section of Romans 8, starting in verse 12. If you got a Bible, you can kind of read along with me. It says this: "So then, brothers, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you've received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. Now the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience." So this is what we are going to be looking at this morning, this section of Romans 8, and kind of talking about how in the gospel we're given a new vision to live towards. The gospel does not just give you a new identity to live from today, but it gives us a new destiny. I think it's a great word to describe what Paul is talking about in Romans 8. It's giving us a new destiny. There's a future reality, a future vision that in some real way is laying claim now to every corner of your life as a Christian. And so in verse 12, where he starts this, he just says, "So then, we are debtors." We are debtors. Your translation might say we have an obligation over us. We are obligated to do a certain kind of thing. And so there are different kinds of obligations. There's some obligations that are put on us by the law, right? You may be obligated to pay back your student loans. Some of you in the room, you're like, yeah, I did the school thing. Now I'm in the process of trying to pay these things back. There's a debt that you owe because you've borrowed on something, but there's other kinds of obligations. There's obligations that come to us through something that's actually deeper than the law. Okay, now let me just explain how this works. When you are a husband, there's a moment that sometimes happens, all right? It doesn't happen as much as you want it to happen, but it sometimes happens. And you catch your wife looking at you with those eyes. You know what I'm talking about? Not the eyes like you did not clean the dishes like you said you were. Not those eyes. You don't want those. These are different kinds of eyes that you see her looking at you with. And if you see her looking at you with those eyes, there is now an obligation, a debt that is on your life that you now must walk over to this beautiful woman and hold them and kiss them hard. You got to do it. Now listen, to not do this, okay, when your wife looks at you with those eyes, to fail to do this is not just to like miss out on an opportunity. No, in some sense, it is to live wrongly. Those smoky eyes have placed a debt on your life you now must pay, okay? Here's another dream I have, that eventually there will be a number of doctors that will go to Treeline that will have very beautiful and fast cars and no time to drive them, all right? This is a dream that I have. I have a dream that one day one of these doctors will come up to me and say, here are the keys to my Porsche. I am simply so busy saving lives at the University of Michigan Hospital, I have no time to drive it. I need someone to drive this car as it was designed to be driven. Pastor, would you do this for me? Two things will happen in my heart. The first thing that will happen in my heart is this. I will know that at some point, I now have to ask this person to likely sell their Porsche so that we can buy a building, all right? That will happen. I will know at some point there's a hard conversation. It'll be hard for both of us that I'm gonna have to have with you. You have this amazing car that you don't even drive. We need a building. But until that day, until I have that conversation, there's gonna be another obligation on my life, and it is to drive that car in every way that those wonderful German engineers designed it to be driven, right? Paul, in this section, is saying something has come into your life and changed your story so that there is now an obligation, a debt. Like you are a debtor to live a certain kind of way. What is that debt? What is that obligation? He says it is actually to put to death something that is still trying to lay claim over your life. And he says that you need to put this to death so that you can live. This is verse 13. This is an incredibly important passage for you as a Christian to memorize and know and view your life in light of. This is Romans 8:13. So then, brothers, we are debtors, not to the flesh. He qualifies this. We're not debtors to the flesh, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, then you will live. So he says, we are debtors. There is an obligation over our life, but it is not to the flesh. Now, the flesh is interesting. If you were here last week, Romans 8, it uses this term a lot. There's according to the flesh, a way to live according to the flesh, to walk according to the flesh, and there's a way to live according to the Spirit. And so he holds out these two different ways of living your life, and it's a term that Paul uses regularly. But here's what it's not saying. Some people read this as though, like, okay, there's the flesh, and they think what Paul's talking about is like the physical, like the earthly body, your kind of physical body. And maybe you think the physical body is dirty and bad, but like the spiritual is good. There's actually a number of religions that teach this, kind of talk about like the ethereal, abstract, spiritual, that's good, and everything that's earthly is kind of bad. That's not the teaching of Christianity. Christianity actually affirms the sacredness of the body. One of the primary ways that Christianity teaches this is actually by the incarnation of Jesus Christ. God himself puts on flesh. He becomes a human being. So the body, the physicality of our nature isn't the thing that's being talked about here. No, the flesh, the term that Paul is using regularly is a term that he basically uses to say this. The flesh is the human being disconnected from the life of God. That's what the flesh is. The flesh is the life, the kind of life where we are at the center of the story. And so to live according to the flesh is to live our lives for ourselves, for our desires, for our felt needs. That's what it means to live according to the flesh. And this is what he's saying. He's saying you actually owe your flesh nothing. It will make demands of you through passions and desires. It will try to get you to do its bidding. and it will try to convince you that it is in fact yourself, and these are in fact your desires. But he says you are not obligated to the flesh anymore. It has no claim to you. You are not indebted to it in any way whatsoever. But you are indebted to something. You are obligated to a certain way of life. And it is that by the Spirit that is in you, you must put to death the deeds of the body. The NIV helps us a little bit. It says we're supposed to put to death the misdeeds of the body. So maybe you're reading an NIV. What are these deeds of the body, these misdeeds? So we're not supposed to live according to the flesh, and to live according to the flesh is to perform these deeds of the body. We're supposed to put these things to death. Well, here's what he's saying. He's saying every use of our body which serves ourselves instead of God and others, we're supposed to put that to death. Every use of our body that is aligned with our old self and not our new self, he says you are to wage war with that part of you. And this is not a passive process. He doesn't say, hey, you need to let those things die. He also doesn't say you need to allow God to put those things to death. No, he gives an active, action-oriented command to the one who has been given the Spirit. And he says, you who are in Christ, you who have been given a new identity, a new heart, and a new power, you who have been given the Holy Spirit of God, you put to death those things that are still in you. Go to war and kill anything in you that refuses to submit itself to the new calling that's over your life. Now, this is a pretty serious thing to say. The word that he actually uses here, put to death, is one word in the Greek. And it's this like one word that basically is this, it's exactly this. It's to put something to death. It's to kill, to bring something forward for execution. That is the language that he's using here. He says things need to be put to death, not coddled or not even defended against, but actively on the offensive, put to death. Here's how Jesus says it in Matthew 16. This is Matthew 16, 24 through 25. It says, then Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, meaning if anyone wants to follow me, here's what you have to do. Let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. So Jesus' invitation in following him is to pick up our own cross. Now it's interesting, Jesus is the one who took the cross in our place. So he is the one who dies on our behalf, but he also says that to follow him, we must also pick up our own cross. And a cross is something that you only carry and pick up if you are walking to your execution. And Jesus says this is the only way to follow him. He continues on and says, whoever would save his life, whoever would defend himself from this way of life will end up losing their life. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. In other words, there's a way of life that leads to death, and there's a way of death that leads to life. Here's what Romans 8 is saying. He's saying now, because of what the gospel has spoken over your story, and because of the destiny that has been written over your future, you are now obligated to actually act against the sinful tendencies in yourself with such seriousness and viciousness that the only metaphor that would be apt to describe what you're doing to it is to bring it forward to be executed, to put it to death. John Owen, in his famous little book, The Mortification of the Sin, he just has like one summary sentence that speaks about this passage. And he just says, what Paul is saying is this. He's saying, you need to be killing your sin or it will be killing you. It is a zero-sum game. You must kill your sin or it will end up killing you. And here's the thing. Even though we've been given this new identity, this new heart, this new power, this is very hard to do. The reason that Paul calls it the flesh is because to put it to death is incredibly and excruciatingly painful. Because yes, you've been given a new identity, and yes, you've been given a new self, but these things in us that are requiring us to put them to death, they define our old self, they define our old life, and they do not want to die. But if you are going to live, then they must die. There are things in your life that if you want to truly live, there are things about your life that will have to be put to death. In this passage, it is as though God, your new heavenly Father, is looking down at you, and it is like he is saying, hey, I know that there are things that are in your life that you view as largely innocuous and mundane, and these things have been part of your life for some of you for a really long time. That thing that's been part of your life for so long it's become a comfort mechanism. That pattern in your life that you know it's not great, but it could be way worse. It's like God is coming to you and he's putting his finger on that and he's saying, this must be put to death. When you follow Jesus, two things happen. The first is he declares over you that you really have a new identity. The old you really has died. That doesn't define you anymore. There really is a new you. But then what Jesus does is he puts a sword in your hand and he says, if this old you ever starts to come back alive, ever starts to make noise, ever starts to try to lay claim to you again, you cut it down. You kill it. And as my experience with many Christians and my experience with my own life is that there are many things in the life of a Christian that instead of putting to death, we coddle. I want to just speak to you in the room who has a struggle with sin that you have kind of allowed to just be called your personality. You've started to just say, this is just the way I am, this is the way our marriage is, this is the way my relationships are. And you've sort of began to rest on the grace of God and say, I can't change, I don't even want to change, but there's forgiveness and grace for me, and so God is going to bring me home someday. And maybe someday I won't struggle with anger, but I know that I just am an angry person today, and that's a normal part of my life. This passage is actually a warning against that. And it's saying if you live according to the flesh, like if your flesh, if you live according to that, it's saying you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the flesh, you will die. So I just want to say this, the pride and arrogance that keeps some of you from treating your husband with respect, you will either root that out and kill it, or it will kill you. The unteachable spirit within you, so that whenever someone comes to you and tries to explain how you're wrong, that thing in you that always defends yourself, always finds a way where, no, you're the wrong person, not me. If you do not wage war with that part of you, then it will end up killing you. Here's what I know with absolute certainty. There is much sin that is still in my life that still needs to die. I've come face to face with that in so many areas of my life this week. There are many things that still exist in my life that still need to be put to death. And if that's true of me, I can almost guarantee that it's true of everyone in the room. We are a group of people that still has much sin in our lives that still needs to die. And the way that it will die in this community and in your life and in your heart is not actually by you passively just sitting back and God doing something. It's actually by you, through the power of the Spirit, putting it to death. And this isn't easy. It's going to be hard. But Paul says we are debtors to this task. We are obligated to live this kind of life. And the reason we're obligated to this task isn't just because it's the only way to live. It's actually because this is what children of God do. This is what children of God do. He says the reason there's this indebtedness that you have to live this way is because you've actually been given the spirit of adoption. So let's look at these next verses. This is verses 14 through 17. It says this: for all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. He's kind of working backwards. So he's not saying, okay, if you're led by the Spirit, then you become a son of God. He's saying, no. Those who are sons of God, this is how they live. They put to death the deeds of the body. They put to death the sin that's in them. They respond in like a warlike fashion against their flesh. So he says, For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you've received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. He says that the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And listen to this. He says, and if children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. Here's what Paul is saying. He's saying the reason that you're indebted to live this way is because this is the way sons of God live in the world. And you, Christian, have been given the spirit of adoption into the family of God. I want to talk about adoption real quick in the first century. There's a number of people in this audience who have adopted. Adoption is a part of Christian culture because this is one of the main stories of Christianity, right? It's like God is a father and he has a son, Jesus Christ, and you've made choices that have put you outside the family of God, and it's through Jesus Christ that you become adopted into his family. And so one of the normal ways we speak about adoption is like belonging to a family. You did not have a father, now you have a father. So there's a sense of belonging for those who did not previously have a family. But adoption in the first century, it normally didn't actually work that way. That wasn't the normal way adoption was practiced. Adoption wasn't primarily a way of taking care of someone who did not have a father or mother. Adoption was actually people being often taken out of a family and placed into a different family, specifically a family of nobility and destiny. Okay, so Caesar, what would often happen is someone who is a king, they would oftentimes find someone who was not in their bloodline, in their lineage. They would find someone and they would actually adopt that person into their family so that they could actually become a legal heir to all that belonged to them. This is the way adoption worked in the first century. And so what it means is this. To be adopted into the family of God is not just to be included and to all of a sudden have a father. No, to be adopted, this person is chosen not primarily to be taken care of, but to be given a destiny and an inheritance and a calling in the world. That's what he's talking about here. So Romans 8, he says, we've received the adoption as sons by which we cry out, Abba, Father. So there's something in us that we look at God and we cry out, that's my dad. That's the one I belong to. That's the one I am a rightful heir of. He's my father. Now, here's a tension in this. There's a lot of gendered language in Romans 8, and so I recognize some of you are in the room, you're like, adoption as sons. You're like, I don't want to be a son. Like, I'm a daughter. Like, why? What's this language? Well, the language is actually important. There's another word he could have used, like we're adopted as sons or daughters, or we're adopted as children. He doesn't say that. He uses very specific language and says, all of us have received adoption as sons. Why? Well, culturally, it was only sons who were considered full and complete heirs of the family. Okay, daughters. Some daughters are doctors. I don't know why that. Daughters were second class, okay? Now, you're still part of the royal bloodline culturally. You're still part of the family, but you were not part of the royal lineage in the same way. And so actually what this text is saying is something that's really amazing and something that all of us need to stand up under the weight of. It is saying that regardless if you are a man or woman, regardless of where you find your status in this world, in the kingdom of God, you are indebted and obligated to actually live out the life of a true heir of the kingdom. This is what he's saying. He's saying no matter the place that you have in the world, you are actually to live your life as though you are a firstborn heir of the kingdom of God. You are to live your life as an heir of all that belongs to the one who's called you his son. And listen, the reason this is important is because in the future, you will not be given a place at the edge of the kingdom of someone who belongs to God but with no real authority and no real status and no real prominence. This isn't the adoption you've been given, okay? And I need you to hear this because so many people are like, this is awesome, I'm adopted into the family, but everybody kind of knows in a family that there's like true-born sons and then adopted children. Like there's some kind of weird difference, and maybe there's like the true lineage, and then there's like this kind of secondary place. This is not what he's saying. God isn't running an orphanage in heaven where he cares for those who needs a family. He has a kingdom, and he has a son who is seated on the throne. And the only human beings who will take part in that kingdom are those who have been united to Christ, have become co-heirs with him, and who will now jointly receive all that belongs to him. This is the adoption we've been given, the adoption as sons, which has made us co-heirs with Christ. This is one of the most important teachings in the entire New Testament, right here. You, Christian, you have been given a new identity, you've been given a new heart, a new power, and you have been given this new destiny, this new vision that sits over your life because you have been adopted as an equal status co-heir with the royal Son of God, of which everything belongs to him. Most people either have a way too high view of themselves and way too low view of a God, or they have way too high a view of God and then way too small a vision of what God's calling them to someday. This is what the Bible says, is it says Jesus Christ, the one true and only Son of God, the only way that he can save people is actually by completely uniting them to himself. And so now the future inheritance, the future reality, the destiny that sits over our life is actually to be an equal status heir with Jesus Christ of all that belongs to him. And every single time you actually sit and explain this to Christians, they go, I don't think that's possible or right. Because Jesus is God. He's God. Like, I'm not God. And the Bible's like, you're right, you're not God. But Jesus is also totally and completely human. And he is the one who's going to be seated on the throne. And actually, there's coming a day where you are being called to be a co-heir with him to rule and reign over the world. That is what you're being called to. And so here's what he's saying. This is actually where your life is headed. That is what is coming your way. That is what the Spirit of God is inside of you, joining with you and crying out that he looks at God the Father, the one who is above all things, and says, Abba, Father, that's who my dad is. He's not just crying out about our adoption, he's also crying out about the obligations and the debts that this future reality now places over the way we live today. Because you cannot live your life trying to prepare to be a somewhat decent teacher or mailman or spouse or football player or business owner. You must begin to prepare yourself to sit on the throne with Jesus Christ and share in his rule and reign of the earth. You must prepare yourself for this, because this is the destiny that is coming your way because you've been joined to Christ. You must prepare yourself to receive back all the authority and status and responsibility of a true child of God. And the only way you're going to be able to prepare yourself to do that is if you actually wage war with everything in you that is beneath that calling. You know, most of us, honestly, almost all of us, we live according to the vision that sits at the center of our souls. I think this is what it is to be a human being. There's a vision you have at the center of your souls, and you largely live out that story. But many of us, we don't have much vision. We don't have much vision. Do you feel like you have a big vision for your life this morning? Many of us, we walk into the world and our stories and our classrooms and our jobs with very little vision. Most of us haven't had much spoken over us by those around us. Most of us, if we're honest, we have a pretty low view of ourselves or what it's possible for us to accomplish or ascend to. And because of this, most of us, we simply spend our time kind of allowing the world to dictate how we should spend our time and what we should give ourselves to. We scroll on our phones, we pursue immediate gratification, we kind of get stuck in these cycles of shame and sin. And often what happens is we look at other people in other places that seem to have some kind of destiny written over their life, and we try to live our lives vicariously through them. This is why, by the way, we care so much when our football team wins or loses, right? This is why you care who Taylor Swift marries. It's because we wrap our destiny and our identity into those that we actually think have the gifts and the callings and the capacities to become something great, but we don't believe that that calling is over our own lives. This is the story of most people in our country. I think it's, in my experience, the story of most people who call themselves Christians. They still don't believe that God's actually calling them personally to that much. Proverbs 19:18 just says, where there is no vision, the people perish. So what is the vision that is driving you forward when you wake up in the morning? What is the destiny that you feel is sitting over your life and has a gravity on every corner of your life that's pulling you to become something? The gospel, it doesn't say that it's possible for us now to come up with a really big vision for our lives and then live it out through the power of God's grace. No, it actually says that God has written a destiny over your story that you are now obligated to align your whole life to. You are a debtor, and this extends to every single corner of your life. The obligation is not to your flesh, but it's to the future reality that is coming your way in Jesus Christ. He says, you've been given the adoption as sons. You become a co-heir with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may be glorified with him. Everyone in the room who's a Christian, we understand intuitively, Jesus Christ is the glorious one and he will be glorified in heaven. And then this passage says that if we suffer with him now, we will also be glorified with him later. This is a stunning inheritance. This is a stunning thing that your God is calling you to. And here's the thing. It says, provided we suffer with him now. You see, the greater vision that's over your life, the more suffering it will cost you, right? If you look at people that have the biggest vision for their life, they're going after the biggest, grandest things in our world. They are also the people who've had to pay the most tremendous costs because they go, where I'm headed is worth sacrificing all other things to become this kind of person or build this kind of empire or do this thing. And when you have little vision, you will not end up giving up very much in your life. Because giving up things is hard, and sacrificing things is hard, and putting sin to death is very costly. And so if you don't have a massive vision for your life, you likely will not suffer much for it. But what Jesus Christ is saying is he's saying, no, there is a destiny written over your life. You are the one who's going to be a co-heir with Christ, glorified with him in the end. So therefore, you need to suffer now with him. Here's how the rest of the text ends. It says this, for I consider the sufferings of this present time, they are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the creation, it waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. Look at verse 19. It says, for the creation itself, meaning everything you see, like the seats you're sitting in, the wood panels, the trees, the birds, the animals, all of creation, it says it is waiting with eager longing for what? For the revealing of the sons of God. All of creation itself is like waiting for the children of God to be unveiled once again. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself would be set free from bondage to corruption and would obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. And he says, for we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth till now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we groan inwardly as we wait for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we were saved. Now hope for what is seen is not hope, for who hopes what he sees? He's just saying, hey, this adoption I'm talking to you about, he goes, this is true of you now, but there's also a real sense where this hasn't come to fruition yet. Like there's a future hope of glory that our lives have been anchored to, but that is a future hope of glory. We don't experience the fullness of that now. So he ends like this, verse 25. But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Do you have a vision of your future that is big enough that you can actually wait for it with patience. Being patient is hard because so often there's gonna be things that are gonna come along. They're gonna promise you life, promise to give you something now, right now. You can have it. And really the only reason we don't take those things when they come to us is if we go, I think there's something better later. Right? Some of you in the room, you took some basic economics classes and you were like, I can either drink coffee every day for the next 10 years or I can be a multi-millionaire when I'm 65, right? You ran the numbers and you were like, okay, I can wean myself off caffeine, right? I can do that. I would love to have millions of dollars someday. You just ran the numbers. Turns out that's kind of how the numbers work out. What's going on there? You got a massive vision for your life that has caused you to live very differently than everyone else around you. The Christian has that at a cosmic scale. There is a massive vision for your life that is not just worth you suffering for, not just worth you putting your sin to death for. It's worth patiently waiting and living a different kind of life now so that you can become a different kind of person later. It says this requires patience. Some of you, you're in the room and you have been really trying to change for a long time. I hope there is something from this series that has been genuinely helpful to you. I hope there's some of you that like grabbed hold in a deeper way of your identity. You're like, wow, this is crazy. I'm trying to perform for an identity and I realize that's half my problems. That's half the reason I can't change. This guy just need to believe the gospel over me. I'm really justified by faith. I'm really like given this new identity from Christ, not of how I perform. I hope some of that was helpful for you guys. Some of you, you needed to like just hear and believe that you really have a new heart, that you really have been set free from your enslavement to sin, that the old you, the enslaved you that just cannot stop sinning really has been put in the ground and it has been killed. It's been crucified with Christ. It's been put to death. There's really a new heart in you that really loves God and you can live from. Some of you, you've needed to know that, to believe that. Some of you, you just needed to know that like this path that God has set out before you, you actually have been given the power to walk it. It's not you anymore. It's not you on your own. Every single thing about the Christian life is done by the Spirit. The God who calls you to follow him also gives you his Spirit and empowers you to. And so some of you, you've been learning hopefully how to actually depend on the power of the Spirit instead of the power of your own flesh. But there's a lot of you in the room who have a number of those things, but you still do not have as big of a vision for your life as your King is trying to give you. And if you have a small vision for your future, if you don't know where you're going, you don't have a picture of the kind of person that has been written over your life, if you don't have a destiny that is clarified, you go, that's who I'm going to become. That is my adoption. That's my future. I'm going to live in line of that. If you do not have that, then you will still live way below the calling God's put in your life. And so what I want to do today is I want to pray that we would be people that have massive vision for our lives. That we'd be the kind of people who look at what's coming and go, I will patiently wait for that. I will suffer with Jesus. I will put these things to death. These things that are hard to put to death because they define the old me and the old me does not want to die. I want to pray that each of us would have a vision that is so massive that it actually begins to help us transform in deep ways we've never experienced before. Let me pray. Jesus, I am a man who is still so weighed down by sin. God, I feel it clings to me closely. God, I read these passages and I look at my life and I go, there's many things that still must be put to death. Jesus, thank you that you've given us a new identity. God, thank you that we're not justified by our performance. God, thanks you've given us a new heart to love you with. Thanks that you've put your power in us. You've literally poured out your Spirit into our bodies so that we can actually obey. We can actually change. We can actually be transformed. And Jesus, thank you that you have put a sword in our hand and you have told us to go to war with anything in us that is beneath this new calling. God, would you give us a massive vision for our life? For those in the room who have been toying with their sin, would you help them put it to death? For those in the room who have been plagued with a heart that still tells us we are enslaved to sin, would you set us free? Jesus, would you make us new? We believe that the thing you have started, you will finish. We believe that one day we will be made exactly as Christ. We believe that we have received the adoption as sons, that one day we will stand in heaven as a co-heir with Christ, and everything that belongs to him will also be laid forward to us, and we will say, this is not mine, this is Christ. And then God will say, yes, you've been joined to him. Come, do what the children of God do. Rule and reign in my kingdom, because you are my son. You are my daughter, and I love you very much. Jesus, would you help us become more and more who you've called us to be? In your name, amen.